have become higher in pitch. So like 440 has started to become like 442.
Yep.
So I think people's ear just prefer something higher.
Yeah, I think people fell in love with this belting movement. They like powerful voices, and then in the more soft delivery styles, like the James Blunts out there, they really EQ that voice. So like the low ends are they really boost up the low ends and the low mids, which is different because usually high mids are what you're boosting in voices, like in rock and roll. But it makes those voices sound way more present when people are listening to them, so they sound powerful in a different way.
Yeah.
You know?
The devices people listen to things on now has shaped that too.
Oh,
So
100%.
small headphones.
Who are you talking about?
Generally about everyone.
We were talking about
music.
Tom Jones, Engelbert Humperdinck.
But and then the timbre of music as it has evolved.
So do they pretend to have deep voices?
No, it's
no.
not.
Tom actually had one.
No, yeah, most famous singers have very deep resonance to their voice, even if they sing like, "Did I disappoint you?" Like what's his name?
Neville?
James Blunt.
Oh, James Blunt. Oh, okay, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, and having a deep resonance to your voice is going to help you. Like even if you're singing falsetto, like even if you hear Steven Tyler talk, he's got a deep resonance to his voice, even though it's kind of like burnt out.
That guy's so just like when he in his peak.
Oh,
yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
He was right there with Robert Plant, you know. As far as
Robert.
that goes.
So him, but also what's his name from fucking from Supertramp, man.
What was that
he
singer's
is
name?
one of the greatest, man. His voice
yeah, I know
like,
exactly. I can picture him, but I don't remember his name.
And he sings nowadays as though he's still back in the 70s. Like, you know how guys like Elton and they have to kind of readjust how they sing as they get older, but this guy's like singing his tunes like.
Yeah. Oh, what was that guy's name, man? I'm like, Hart. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Hart was a woman, wasn't it?
No, Mark Hart. No, the singer of Supertramp.
Okay.
Yeah. Crowded House. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the band Hart. No, I don't mean that. I mean,
there's
you
also,
know what's interesting too, man, is like, there's not until recently was it fair for a woman to front a band. Men fronted bands with a higher register.
Yep.
Right, because they fill that space with the resonance you're talking about. But today, like I said, because of the pitch change, the woman frontman is much more appealing.
Right. And by the way, speaking of women frontmen, Elisa, Elisa. She's from Spain. She does that song. The one song that went really famous for her was that ballad "Dancing." I suggest anyone who's listening to this, because we are now live at the Pangburn Offensive. Anyone who's listening to this, go check out that song by Elisa, "Dancing," and make sure you watch her perform it live. She's like she's probably my favorite female vocalist of all time.
Andrea Bocelli and her did this in Italy in 2007.
Yeah, she's sang with all the greatest.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, she's it's depressing how unknown she is worldwide, but that's kind of like Salif Keita from Africa as well.
Mm-hmm.
He does. He did the Ali song. Tomorrow, Lordy, tomorrow. Sega, Sele tomorrow, something like that. I don't know the.
Yeah, you start to get into a territory where it becomes complicated music, and that just doesn't.
But
sell.
there's fucking big talent all over the world. It's not just the West. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
anyways,
I mean,
so we've had some interesting discussions going on today regarding the death penalty. You know, one of the things I always think about when it comes to the death penalty, and I want to open this up. I'm going to mute and hide myself for a bit, just because I want to go and share this across the Pangburn spectrum, so we get some more people in here. But I always think like I'm not sure we can ever be absolutely certain about anything, and that would include whether someone is actually, you know, guilty of a crime or not. And I think that's why in law, like when I see like Ted Bundy get convicted for his crimes, I'm not absolutely certain that Ted Bundy did all those crimes. I'm almost certain, but I'm not absolutely certain. So, and I don't see how we can put someone to death without being absolutely certain. And then the other thing about that is, my moral foundation, maximize well-being for myself and those around me. That includes for me criminals, and I want an avenue for people to seek redemption. And I know, Bruce, you talk about that a lot, and I'm not sure where you sit on the death penalty scale, but I think there are ways to, even if I think it's a victory, even if we get people to a point where they can recognize why what they did was wrong, and maybe write or talk about it with other inmates, and maybe young people who are coming through the prison system, and young people that may have this strange machismo view of those hardened criminals, and think that, like, oh, yeah, that guy's badass. He killed like 17 motherfuckers. And then they get into prison, and then they meet him, and he's running a class on like why I was wrong or something, about, living this, violent, eye for an eye morality life. And, and then also there's the other aspect of, like, encouraging them to help clinical psychologists better understand the conditions that led to them carrying out the crimes that they did. And then one other thing is, when I look at biological determinism and the deterministic cosmos that we almost certainly live in, the difference between Ted Bundy and myself is that, he rolled a different set of dice as I did. That's the only difference. It's a luck thing. You were all very lucky to be born into, this biological determinism that you found yourself in, to not be the Ted Bundy, to not come out as Ted Bundy. I think that this is what physics, classical mechanics and quantum mechanics tells us about the cosmos we live in. So I don't hold people responsible on that deterministic scale for anything. But while we're playing within the illusion of free will, we must, because we find it pleasurable, do things to protect others from potentially violent people. And I think the prison system is, this can be improved upon. Maybe the prisons should be we need to find a way to make them less about, okay, you got to get connected up with a gang so you don't get killed or raped. And first of all, find a way to stop the rape in prison. But then find a way to allow society to benefit from, allow the criminals to spread and maybe provide some well-being and give back to the community, as they have taken something. And I know Mace, maybe Mace wants to take over here. I know he has this idea of enslaving and putting the prisoners to work kind of as slaves. But anyways, I will mute, and anyone can come in with what they wish.
Yeah, I agree. Put them to work, make them give back what they stole. Fucking twats.
Well, we already have a twat bomb.
What if they would? Well, I mean, like, nobody's getting put to death for stealing. So if you steal like a loaf of bread, like, so your family doesn't starve, you're not getting put to death, unless you're in like some extreme culture, right?
I didn't say enslave bread thieves.
But you said theft, and like when we're talking about
no, I didn't say
thievery.
theft. I was talking about give back what they stole in a metaphorical sense. Like, they took something from society, so now they have to contribute, sort of thing.
Oh, I gotcha. So not necessarily thievery, but just what was taken from society by their actions that they need to restitute whatever was taken away. right?
Not, not really familiar with the word restitute.
Like
Yeah,
restitutions, like you pay back your so United States, like if you do something wrong and you get convicted of a crime, typically you have to pay restitution as well as going through any sort of, penitentiary. So you're not only getting the punishment for your crime, but you have to pay restitution in some form or another.
yeah, sure, yeah. Because if you kill them, then they can't do anything to minimize the damage or reverse the damage that they've
Yeah,
done. If
yeah,
you keep them as a
there's
slave, at least you can put them to work to undo some of that damage.
Yeah, and that's and if you look at what actually happened in the South after the Civil War, that's basically what they did is they passed all these crazy laws where like, okay, what we can do is we can basically put people in indentured servitude and just make them slaves without necessarily calling it being slaves, right?
Are you talking about America?
Yeah, 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 in America. But what I'm pointing out is when you go down that line of reasoning, guaranteed at some point somebody's going to take advantage of that and then start abusing it, right? That's why I just don't think that is
And so,
necessarily in the long run the wisest route to go.
well, it's better than killing them.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But forced labor, like that's the thing. I think with something like that, the probably the best thing we can work at is like rehabilitation, as opposed to just being like, okay, well, you're in this situation now, so we're gonna force you to work in some laborious job that's gonna benefit us right now. But once you get out, is there any like were you rehabilitated at all? And if they weren't rehabilitated at all, they're probably just going to go back and do the same kind of bullshit. And that to me seems to be the bigger problem. And it's one of those things because when somebody commits a crime like that, people do have this natural instinct for retribution where they want somebody to pay for what they've done, but when we look at society, is that necessarily the best thing? Like if we take out the emotional aspect of somebody being they need to pay for what they've done, what would be the actual best way
Nah,
to
nah.
make this?
Revenge has no place in law, in my opinion.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I mean the death penalty is 100% about revenge. It's not necessarily.
No, no. The death.
Yeah.
If I was to accept the death penalty, which I don't think anyone has the right to kill another person except in self-defense. But if I was to accept it, it would be on the basis that somebody, that person who we're going to execute, is too dangerous to be left alive. And the idea is that if we kill them, it's to prevent them from committing more murders.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, but we have people in supermax prisons and all that kind of stuff, and they've committed these crimes, and they're never going to get out. We really don't actually have to worry about that. The next
Okay, hang on, let me rephrase that. They're too dangerous to be left alive, and it's not worth paying to keep them locked up the rest of their life
exactly.
because they're not going to be rehabilitated.
That's what I was going to say.
Why should we pay to feed them for the next 50 years that they could be alive? Just cut their head off now, save us
Yep,
a bit of
so
cash.
yep, so that's what I was gonna say. The next line people always go down after that is, well, we shouldn't have to pay for this. Well, like paying for something, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, if we're talking about the morality of something, we're not talking about the economics of something. Because initially, so that's what always seems to happen in this conversation is you initially go from like a moral conversation about retribution, rehabilitation, and restitution to being something along the lines of like, well, we don't want to pay for somebody we don't want to pay for this. Let's just kill them now and just get it over with, and we'll save money. But then that breaks the moral argument right there. Go ahead, Trev.
I oof. It doesn't seem to work in America, so. But also, it's like from the ethical perspective, I'm against it. Like from both perspectives, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah,
You mean from a moral and economic perspective? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
When I would say Mace, because we could have people who are in prison for the rest of their life without necessarily having to do forced labor. I mean, people could be like, okay, well, what do you want to like? You got to do something, right? And so people have to like make a decision on what they want to do. But like when I think of forced labor, I think of like, God, what is Angola? If you're familiar with that prison in Louisiana, it's fucking atrocious, dude. It is absolutely atrocious what they do to people there.
I'm not familiar, I'm afraid.
Well, it's a conversation that's been going on for a long time, and the problem always comes down to the economics, the way our current system is set up. Because even if you have a state that has a death penalty, there aren't very many folks that are actually put to death, and the appeals go on for a long time. And there was a debate here where I live that was promoted to eliminate the death penalty, not because of the morality of the issue, but just because of the economics. Because it costs way more to keep someone on death row than it does just to have someone in general incarceration. But the problem with
why are people being kept in death row? Shouldn't that just be like a 2-day and then you're gone sort of thing?
Well, but that's not the way it works because of our appeals system. And then when DNA became an issue and states realized that there was the potential of exoneration because of DNA evidence that didn't exist previously, that changed the game, and it changed it with the legislatures to the point where they said, well, we're not going to put people to death because they might actually be innocent. And then there was a whole level of funding that was attributed to DNA databases and reopening cold cases. And once you had that opportunity, then everyone's appeals just got extended and extended. And it was so expensive that it prompted legislation to have the death penalty removed and just not have this as an option at all, and take the sentencing option away from judges, because these folks were never going to get out anyway. They were dying of natural causes in prison. But it was so much cheaper just to keep them as an inmate than it was to have them on death row that was the argument.
So I missed all of what you were saying, but were you saying that like because the death penalty wasn't carried out swiftly and this was an expense versus jail?
Yes, it was. I don't remember the numbers. Last time this came through was, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. But it was, it wasn't just twice as expensive to keep someone on death row. It was, 10 times the cost of just normal incarceration. And when you have, and most states have this problem. There's limited resources. They have limited budgets. And when you are a legislator making decisions of how much money you're going to spend on corrections versus how much money you're going to spend on K-12 or higher ed or transportation or Medicare, Medicaid, and corrections is not the issue that most voters care about.
Mm-hmm.
They all care about, they only care about it if you have a criminal justice reform issue that comes in and says, look, we have people in prisons that shouldn't be there. The war on drugs was a failure, and these people are serving sentences for victimless crimes, so to speak. And so how do you address that? How do you justify that to the voters when you're cutting state funding to higher ed, let's say, and you're going to spend all this money on corrections, but your child has to pay the same amount to go to college as someone from out of state, and voters don't like those. They don't like those issues, and so they generally don't get a lot of airtime. And legislators find ways to fund things or to not fund things. And part of the problem with turning folks out of prison is, especially if there's mental health issues associated with that incarceration, which now we have a significant number of mental health inmates because we have deinstitutionalized the mental health system, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
For all of the reasons that probably should have been done, the prison system has become the de facto mental health institution. And now, when you have served your sentence and you have gone through your rehab programs and you leave with your 30 days of medication and your antipsychotics or whatever it is, when that medication runs out, then what do those folks do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they generally revert. They don't follow up on their treatment. They don't follow up on their therapy, and then they recidivate. And then they're back into the system. And now they're back into the system longer. The problem is always you can never get legislatures to fund those programs beyond the 30 days or the 45 days or the 60 days of treatment once they leave the prison system, because the costs are just, they're prohibitive, and states don't have the resources.
So I do have a question that though, because you can say the costs are prohibitive, but is the cost of that person committing another crime and then going through the entire court system and understanding how much a judge is paid, understanding how much prosecutors are paid, understanding that the amount of cost for that person to be incarcerated, do you think it might be cheaper to just like, okay, well, these people need this this medication that's only $100 a month, as opposed to the total cost that would be accrued from them going back into the legal system?
Yes, no, you're exactly right. But when I say prohibitive, it's politically prohibitive because you can never get enough votes to fund those programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched this. I used to be involved in the corrections industry for a long time, and I've watched this happen over a career in politics, and there are no easy solutions. You can't even force people into treatment while they're incarcerated.
Right.
It's all voluntary. It would be different, and that's why I think the mental health institutionalization programs that we had in the past were more successful, because once you were institutionalized, then you were required to take medication. You were required to engage in treatment programs. That was just part of your treatment. When you're incarcerated, all of those things are options. Now, the option comes from the fact that, if you take this treatment program and you take the mental health courses and you take the drug and alcohol addiction treatment and you do all these things, then it takes time off your sentence. Or you can say, I don't want to do any of that. I'm good to go, and you just wait out your time until your mandatory parole date.
I'm curious if you know the reason why that is, because obviously once you're incarcerated, you are fundamentally losing rights as a U.S. citizen, right? I mean, that's the entire point. At that point, why can't they dictate like, okay, you need to go into this program? Even when somebody's on probation, they have restricted rights. Why can't that be? Why can't it just be said, okay, well, you need to go through these programs when you're in this phase? And obviously, once somebody gets out of probation, they can't force them. But in those two stages, why aren't
That,
they out allowed to force people to do that?
yeah, that's a good question. And the ACLU won that battle a long time ago. It's easier to force someone into treatment and once they're on parole. And parole is just, this short period of time. And you have some early release conditions too if you're out early. But yeah, generally once your sentence is up, and you are free to go, and the state has no more control over you. And so the ACLU decided you cannot force people to do anything they don't want to do, regardless of whether they're incarcerated or not. And sometimes, especially if they're incarcerated, and that's where this issue stems from.
Yeah, for sure. Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, so for me, maybe just taking it back to the question around morality for a moment. I can't seem to reconcile legalizing the death penalty in a world where, and I think you touched on it, Travis, where we don't have certainty that the person we're executing is guilty of a crime, or in this case, murder, or whatever qualifies for the death penalty under the current structure. So for me, that's usually where it ends, for my opinion. I do take into consideration, though, societies that don't have the resources, to permanently incarcerate people who are dangerous to society and obviously need to be removed to a certain extent. I think that's where it becomes a little bit trickier. But ideally, and particularly for countries like the U.S., that's where, from a moral standpoint, I would kind of be against it. Full stop.
I would say that. I mean, it would seem. The only thing I would say is like, if we're going to take the approach that we don't have certainty, um, then there's no certainty around any conviction of any crime, and so now we're discussing whether or not certain crimes are worthy of punishment at all, and what the punishment should be, and why something as simple as murder would not be, versus other situations which I would argue are largely inhumane, victimless crimes with large prison sentences, removal of rights in a society they're no longer allowed to participate in, one that was already forced upon them via the dubious social contract. So there's a distinction made around this particular crime versus others. And I would say that the same logic would apply as far as not having certainty. So, why is this particular issue more concerning?
Yeah,
think.
go ahead. I wasn't sure if that was for me.
Oh, my blank.
I think John Boy was going to go.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna respond to the question. I think I think the point of distinction I would make, because I think you're right, to what extent do we have certainty in either scenario? I think the idea of killing someone, creates a separate condition, right? If you're going to incarcerate someone, then theoretically there's an appeals process and people can work through that. And listen, it's never going to be perfect, but until someone dies or is put to death, there's always the opportunity for the system to correct that. But I agree with you, generally speaking, that there's plenty of other things that we could address from a from a criminal justice perspective that represent immoral kind of functions.
Right.
But
Sorry, I had to step away there for a second. I would say we need to practice rehabilitation, not threat of incarceration or threat of death. And we seem to be transitioning from a time where we do have this, spare the rod, spoil the child mentality. We see it in our parenting techniques, and we see it in our policing techniques. This is something that is not congruent with how we actually want to rehabilitate and what mental health experts say is the proper way to deal with adults that are acting out. If we believe in rehabilitation and we believe that those people have a debt to pay to society, and in some ways ending their life is also excluding them from that debt. It is a payment, sure, but a pound of flesh I don't think is appropriate.
Well, the question I would always say is like, depending on how you would go, if somebody's interested in rehabilitation, is the rehabilitation against their will? And then also, what evidence do we have that rehabilitation is somewhat better in the case of, chronic murder, that it would be preferable? But also, how do we find that this, scales, as far as, like John Boy was saying, there are constraints around systems of economics or systems of, institutions.
Say we focus on. Say we focus on options for rehabilitation. The answer is obviously tons of options that are out in front of us, depending on the personality that we have to rehabilitate. I think if we focus on that more than, what does it cost to just snuff the person, and we focus on that, and then the ways to actually kill people is what we seem to be focusing on as far as options and economics. I think that value, like, we don't look at value for long term. I think if you take somebody and who has murdered and you inspire them to turn their life around, I think that value is almost unquantifiable on the effects that it will
I would
have
agree.
on your people.
I would
So-
agree. Yeah, redemption, changed lives, restitution, all parties being forgiven.
When I would
is ideal.
say the absolute majority of murders are like crimes of passion, and not because somebody is like a serial killer psychopath. Certain
Right.
people like your John Wayne Gacy's. Yeah, I mean that's a different situation than
Those
somebody.
people wouldn't be in jail forever.
Well,
It's just as much.
Yeah,
yeah.
but the jail forever thing, I
crazies.
think, is sort of. I don't know about that. I would say it's more inhumane than killing them. But
to me, that's
Um,
justice. To me, the justice
I
is
would say
showing
it's
the rest
not.
of the world, that evil exists by it still being there, and I think that we can afford that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, or if it's clear now that the question is the rehabilitation against their will, or what do you mean by that?
No, so as far as rehabilitation is concerned, like for instance, people make the distinction between incarceration and rehabilitation. They're one and the same as far as I'm concerned, because rehabilitation would require an individual to be rehabilitated regardless of their cooperation. So that's really no distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really just
Okay.
talking about what incarceration looks like. But even then, we've had these discussions, and we're where we are now. Just like Cutter was saying,
Okay.
it politically
Mhm.
doesn't make sense, or at least doesn't happen. So
Okay.
Actually, foo is a military term for
Yeah, I was just going to add one other thing. When in terms of rehabilitation and what we've seen in criminal justice system is that there are three basic types of folks who end up in the system. There are the folks that do something wrong. They're incarcerated. They realize that this is a horrible mistake and a horrible place, and this is the last place they want to be, and they work really hard to never end up there again. And those are the type of folks that sort of rehabilitate themselves. And then you have the people who are there because they have become institutionalized, and life in prison is way better than life outside of prison for them. And there are people that have learned how to game the system to commit the minimum crime to get the maximum amount of sentence so that they don't have to leave the facility, and to be incarcerated in the minimum level of security inside of a facility. And then the third category are the people that are just inherently bad people, and in some cases there is no rehabilitation. It's been tried. There has, we spend a lot of money on programs. We spend a lot of money on therapeutics, and at the end of the day, there are just people that cannot be rehabilitated.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because they
And
choose not
what do we do with those people?
That's a good question, and then I think that gets us. Do you just keep them incarcerated for the rest of their lives so that they do not have the opportunity to injure someone else, or do you end the opportunity permanently? Right, and then now we're having the death penalty conversation. But,
I think there's some other options there.
That's just that's just the basic reality of our criminal justice system.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's some options that aren't
we want to
explored.
know what's your opinion. Do you think we should kill them or something else?
I go back and forth. I really do, because in some ways, being in prison could be the only form of retribution, and if you could do it, if you could force people to make amends, restorative justice. We've had this conversation a lot over the years about what is restorative justice and how do people who have committed crimes make amends to the victims. The current system we have doesn't accomplish that. It only does it on its face. If you could do something like that, it would require a level of force that honestly the ACLU hasn't allowed in this country for a long time, because of the abuses of those earlier criminal justice systems where they were in essence slave labor camps, and they would figure out a way to keep people incarcerated past their normal parole dates, and they did become slave labor camps, and people who were not people were being abused who didn't deserve that level of abuse. And so, hence where we are today.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the questions that always comes up is people that are wrongfully imprisoned, right, or wrongfully incarcerated, and I think that's what kind of what you're getting at. I could be wrong, but there are situations where imprisonment would be not restitution, right? So if an affected party now there's a caveat to this, and I would say unless we're talking about state property, the state isn't the affected party, which I think is what happens. So you'll have the state pursue an individual when a private party doesn't wish to pursue them. So let's say they do something to a business, the business doesn't want to pursue them, but the state will as a deterrent. Well, there's no restitution to be paid to the state if the private individual is not seeking restitution. But let's say you are seeking restitution, Well, if you don't have assets and you don't have money, what do you have for restitution? Labor. And so there would be a path to restorative justice and restitution if people were able to use their labor in an effort to pay for their debt. But that's not encouraged, allowed at all today. It's illegal. I don't see an issue with that if an individual is willing to do so. Now, I guess the other alternative would be to sit and rot in a cell. But wouldn't you rather use your labor and not stay in a cell?
After
Isn't
Grim
the Seventh
responds,
Amendment?
I just wanted to say after Grim responds, I want to hear from Jolly, Killian, Wise Ape. But go ahead, Grim.
Isn't the Seventh Amendment penal slavery? So we do allow these things, and we pay those people a small fee to pay back for like certain costs that they owe and legal fees, and it's a better incentive, obviously, for those people to do a better job. So, what do you think about the penal slavery side?
It's minimal as far as what is paid, and the overhead is usually not worth. It's sort of that's a net negative, actually.
Hang on a minute. No, they can't get paid. If you pay them money, then they're not slaves anymore. They're just
no, not them. Their party's affected.
Right.
So,
they only working inside a prison.
That's not
a slave is someone who works without pay.
Yeah, and they still have to buy all that. They have to buy. Sometimes they have to buy their own toilet paper, right?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, let's. I want to hear from Jack. What do you got, Killian? What do you think of the death penalty? What are you hearing here?
All right, so I don't know. So what I've been thinking about the death penalty specifically is, I don't think it should be used as like a waving flag for people to like not do anything wrong, because I haven't seen that be useful in any way so far. But I do think that it should exist for people that we can't rehabilitate. Like the alternative is like 24-hour isolation or like 23-hour isolation, and I think that's just as fucked up, if not as fucked up, as killing him. It's in that situation, in the situation of what I think it should be used for is just if we have somebody that, okay, we tried to rehabilitate them to our best of our abilities, and he killed the nurse or the ward or whatever who was helping him. All right, and then we tried to rehabilitate him one more time, and then he killed the guard that was trying to watch him. It's just like, okay, how many people are we gonna let go before he just can't have contact with people? And then we have to find a way, I guess, to imprison people without contact, so he can't even get near somebody to murder them. And then we have to waste resources on that just for a couple of people who are going to be like that, when if we just got rid of them completely, even especially because they seem to be a negative on society as a whole, it increases not only it increases, I think it increases well-being at the end of the day.
Interesting. Let's get Jolly in here. Hey Jolly, wasn't it back?
Hey, how's it going? Well, I think I agree with what Jack just said as well, and also what Bruce said, because I think we're forgetting a critical element here, which is the idea of justice. I mean, we sort of are looking at, focusing everything, all our attention purely on what happens to the criminal or, the perpetrator, and sort of just bypassing the parties that have come to the justice system to seek justice. And if the whole attention is how we can rehabilitate people that have wronged them, what exactly are they getting from the whole enterprise of seeking justice in the first place? For me, that's something that's always ignored. It just has been ignored completely. It's like we sort of shove them in a box and say, well, nothing we can do can bring back your loved one, and thanks for contacting us, and we'll take care of the guy that's done, or person that's done wrong to you, and we'll probably use your taxes to, maybe correct them, do whatever. Thanks and goodbye. And that's basically it. So the justice component of the legal system is just sorely missing. I'm like, what if you were to put yourself in the position of the victim's loved ones, what are they getting from the justice system exactly? Is what I am sort of interested in discussing.
I think that's confusing that with vengeance in some ways, and I think we have a good understanding of what justice is. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that a system is going to do besides catch the perpetrator that is going to give that family relief. What's going to give that
Well,
family relief is actually forgiveness of the person who did it.
I'm
Yeah.
actually
Well, I mean,
I'm actually interested in knowing like what the moral bedrock of that is. Like to me, if we're operating in a sort of a morally neutral system, so we've already said we sort of use a lot of these terms like morality and so on and so forth. If we have to be sort of clear on which moral system we're referring to. We're talking about consequentialism. I think the death penalty is the easiest way to avoid further consequence to
But-
the reoffense of that person. That's the dead set way of stopping someone that's known to have killed, especially in the cases of serial killers and whatnot. And I actually don't know. We don't explore vengeance. Why is vengeance by necessity a negative? I don't actually see that. We need to explore that. Like it's sort of just used as that's not a area we need to explore, because I think that's a genuine human emotion. We seek vengeance for the smallest of grievances in life. I mean, someone
Yeah,
cuts us off on the road, we seek vengeance. We yell at them, we do something. So I think just one of the biggest tragedies a human being can encounter, and we just say, well, no, sorry, this is where vengeance doesn't work. I mean, we need to explore that again. Why is that from a moral neutral perspective?
Because vengeance is not about the future. Vengeance is not about good planning.
About the
Vengeance is about
yeah,
a thrill,
sure.
is about
Yep.
is about thrill of the moment. And those who take vengeance is almost childlike in my opinion, about how we want other people to feel the way we feel, and that's really not
Yes.
empathy at its best. And at the end of the day, kind of to Killian's point too, is that I would rather lock them up for a very long time and try to solve their problem of psychopathy and sociopathy, and in a way, that they will be part of the state. And hey, we're going to try to help you against your will, but we're going to try to help you, and it's going to come in pill form. It's
Doesn't
going to
that-
come in therapy form. It's going to come in all sorts of forms.
Also,
hold on a second.
it's,
That part right there,
Jump
that
in
against
there.
your will part, doesn't that kind of incentivize the fact that people would work against that purposefully? Like, here, we're going to help you, and you're not going to want help because you're a psychopath and you haven't wanted to talk to anybody in 20 years. Yeah, that he's
They also
like,
don't wanna be
how
in
do you,
jail.
how do you? Yeah, well, yeah, of course he doesn't want to be in jail.
So you're already going against
No,
his will, but that's the social
Well, no,
contract.
well, yeah, What I'm saying about going against his will in this case is you're helping him against his will. This help, when you can only help someone when they are into wanting to help themselves. You can't help someone against their will,
Right. Well, sort of.
not mentally. Like you can't really you can't force somebody to get better because you want them to be better. Or these are the steps that you think to take that'll be better. You can try, but that doesn't. It doesn't. You can't actually do that.
If it's chemical, eat your broccoli. I mean, it just is what it is.
That's
We're
not.
gonna keep
It's
on- we're gonna
chemical.
keep on-
Yeah,
we're
but
gonna keep on
everybody's
putting stuff
brain
down
is
your throat.
different.
I know. But if we
So how is
Jack-
that any more
Jack-
moral than killing?
Jack, let's let
Because-
Grim get in.
Because the data is more important, first off, and second off is that once again we have to get away from under threat, right? Because people still kill, like people like to what Big Lebowski's saying is that people are still going to kill in the heat of passion, knowing the consequences that they could get the death penalty. It will still happen. What we need to do
That's why I
is
did say-
the only way to stop these things, like even drug abuse, is to get ahead of them for once, to get ahead of them and focus on not only rehabilitation but inspiration to others that can't find a way out, that feel frustrated. So I'm going to kill this fucking person, and they need to look towards resources that let them think differently.
Can I just
And we're
ask
not
a
creating
question,
those
though?
resources. We're creating penalties.
Yeah, go ahead,
I,
Jolly.
I think there was a point I was trying to make, which was, I mean, I know you addressed that, Grim, which was you said that it was, childish to do something. But again, I don't think, what's the moral bedrock here? Like, we have to sort of explore the concepts a bit deeper than
Jolly,
just
that's a
that
great.
means.
This is a great idea. I just want to get Wise Ape in first, and then I'm going to open, and then we'll go to Bojangles. I just want to open this up a bit after that. Wise Ape, go ahead. Your thoughts?
Okay. I was thinking, what would be wrong with a free-range prisoner? So they're not incarcerated, take them out of the jails, take them out of the city limits, put them in a territory somewhere, maybe a valley, but they're free-range because nature, has already given us. Nature has already given us the death penalty, every single one of us. So maybe these criminals, we don't have to take care of them. They can take care of themselves.
Did you just create the Hunger Games?
This is a George Carlin bit. He did that bit. Said it's fence off a state like Kansas, make it square,
Well,
put all the murderers and
once
rapers
in
and
a
child
while,
molesters,
we
put it
can-
on TV and
we
put
can-
advertisements on their ass.
Right, we can drop a tiger down in there once in a while.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We
but-
used to do that with
No,
prisoners a lot of
here's the
places, right?
point.
There was exile. Was
If
it? Was
they
it?
So
can't-
introducing Ted
if they
Kaczynski, brought to you
can't-
by Coca-Cola.
If they can't live in a society, if they got a better way of doing it, let them do it in this territory.
Yeah, we did that.
And we're not going to be there to give them medical treatment or anything like that. It'll just be a very, very
Penal colonies were pretty common.
short life, probably. And then
Exile
maybe
was
you
a thing, man.
You could have like a thing where they could like go to every day and maybe make something to show that like, hey, they want to return. And I don't know what the return requirements would be, but like, you're not going to rot in jail for 20 years. You may die that winter. You may slip, like, who knows, but you're
You may
on
also
your own.
band together with the prisoners and raise a revolt.
Right.
Now we're coming back.
So
Right.
it's just, it's like, it's a bizarre thing, but that was my thoughts.
No,
Like,
I get it.
a
It's cool. It's an interesting
a
idea.
free range prisoner, like they talk about free range chickens and free range,
We're
all
just
this
extending
stuff.
the walls of the prison to the size of the state.
I was gonna say, like,
Well, what
you guys really need to watch the movie Escape from L.A.
Yeah,
starring,
right.
starring Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, what
But-
if we had some sort of technology that could, if somebody was going to do something like that, we could like prevent them from doing it, so they could just go back out into society and go get a job at like, being like a trash pickup man or like,
It's like Demolition Man type stuff. You're talking about?
something like that. But if we had the technology where we could prevent somebody from doing something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in other words, you're able to
Actually,
program their
Doolittle-
brain.
I want to bring up what Doolittle said in the chat earlier today when I asked the death penalty question. He was talking about, if we had a technology where we could, forcefully hold down someone who's suffering from psychopathy and delete that part of their, hardware, would people be ethically okay with this? Because
acceptable.
I don't think we're too far from being able to do something like that. And when I say that, in the next 100 years, I think this will be a last ditch effort treatment.
I find that
it's
to be
essentially like
I
a
find it
more
to be very
detailed-
acceptable.
Like an actual scientifically driven lobotomy, right? Not just like sticking like a prong up someone's nose and seeing how they react.
But then at what point are we like deciding what exactly are we doing? You're like fabricating individuals in some
You're
way.
gathering data is what you're doing. You're experimenting on a population that is socially and psychologically inept, and so you're trying to help them, but in a way you're also kind of gathering data for the future psychopaths.
Yeah, but not necessarily. Like, what if we could figure out a way the same way we do with like Parkinson's disease? So like people with Parkinson's basically get like a little electrode node implanted into their skull, and it just gives off like a constant signal to battle like the effects of Parkinson's. So what if we could figure out a place in someone's brain where all you had to do is set some little node that gave like constant. It wouldn't be lobotomized. It wouldn't be changing. It would just be.
Well, I would argue that everyone has the capacity to do these heinous crimes. There are some that act on those heinous crimes, and some of the actions are a result of the environments in which they're placed. So there has to be a distinction made why or if there's any sort of significant factor that could be found for people that somehow do it worse than others or act upon those things. To me, that seems like a very tall order.
And also the other thing I was going to say is, if we look at a societal position on the death penalty, I mean, we seem to think that it's inhumane to not focus a lot of energy and corrective services on high-end criminals, but there's a lot of people in our society, like we talk about healthcare system, we talk about homelessness. We don't even have an iota of compassion, I think, as a society towards those people who are largely innocent and just results of their circumstances. It seems like they get lost in the cold a bit. But when it comes to serial killers and other types of people who are clearly not there for good reasons, they've done something to society to damage them. We tend to get all sort of I don't know, higher than thou in a sense, and go, oh, we can't be childish like them. We gotta we don't even have the sense of scale in terms of having a just system for.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's documentaries about serial killers on the regular. I haven't seen like many documentaries on kleptomaniacs or people that are addicted to heroin, or people that do perform fellatio to get their necks fixed. So
there
it
are
seems
far
like
fewer.
There's a lot less. So it's fascinating when it comes to killing, because everyone has the capacity to do it. Everyone knows that desire to kill somebody to get over with because it's a short-term solution.
I would say, I mean, that sort of line of argumentation just has problems. It's, because you can say, well, we treat these killers better than we do the homeless. So what you're saying is we should treat the killers as bad as the homeless, or
worse than the homeless,
or should we treat the homeless with better, right? So
sure. So
the answer is definitely treat the
Just
homeless
2
better.
seconds, guys, before we jump into that. I just want to get Bojangles in first. I really want to hear Bojangles' take on the death penalty, and then we'll open up the room and let the battlefield run.
Yeah, Bojangles, give me some fried chicken.
I got a childish take on this one, according to the room. If I don't know, I'm not going to say I'm super pro death penalty, but I do see that it has utility. Like whenever I see like a case where, for example, somebody fucking like murders a child or rapes a child or something, I try and put myself in that family's shoes, and I'm like, man, what would I want done if somebody killed my kid? I wouldn't want forgiveness, not even a little bit. I wouldn't want to forgive that person. I want that person dead. And I don't care if that's a reaction or a very reactionary answer. Like
100%, 100%.
They've aggressed against an innocent person. I don't think they deserve a chance. I think they deserve death.
Well, this is a good.
You can never point out a single time that we were so sure that this person did it, and the family was like, "Yeah, we got to kill that person." And it turns out that person didn't actually do it.
Can I ask you a question?
Let me paint
Can I ask you a
scenario.
question?
Yeah, go, Grim.
If somebody killed you, do you want your wife, somebody that you love, go find that person and kill them in passion?
Or would you rather them,
you would want to do that.
That's how we honor, but that's how we're honoring some people.
My son will do that.
Hold on, there's a bunch of people talking at once. I can't hear what you were saying.
And that's the problem. Is if somebody did that to my children, like my first instinct is to kill that person. My second instinct is that's not what my children would want their daddy to do.
So I have something here. I want to throw this scenario. So imagine if you don't have children. Imagine, hey, Wise, can you mute? I'm hearing your saw, I think.
My bad. Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to paint the scenario. So say this is how this plays out. A burglar breaks into your house. They tie you to a chair so you can't do anything. And they forcefully make you watch them rape your child to death in front of your face, in front of your eyes. So you know that they did this. Is there and let's say before they're able to kill you after, because they wanted you to watch, that's part of their thing. The police show up and they arrest this guy. So as certain as you can be about anything, that this person raped your child to death. So there's going to be feelings of things that you want to do to them. But when you honestly look at your moral foundation in that situation, and if you can stay true to it as it sits right now, what do you think should happen to that person? Do you
Torn to shreds. Torn to shreds.
easily.
Wait, hang on. You guys, please speak clearly and don't talk over each other. Jolly, go ahead.
I would want that person torn to shreds. Yep.
Torn to
And if
shreds.
if the cops won't do it, I would do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what about anyone else? And Jolly, how and what within your moral foundation, Jolly, allows for that?
My sense of justice, my sense of retribution. You can call it childish, whatever you want. I don't. At that point, I would not care about a label that someone else would want to,
Yeah.
No, I'm
impose
just
on me. They
asking
can tell me
about your within your moral framework, like what part of
well-
it allows for that. I just want to get a little more detailed than just like, I'm allowed to flip my lid when I want,
I don't think anybody said that, but
Well, I think when you talk about moral framework, I mean this is coming from a place of, I would say what we constitute as morals as you can have them personally driven. If there's no objective morality, I do believe that we're all standing on the same footing here. Like there's no more right or more moral and less moral concept. That if we were live in the world of moral subjectivity or relativism, there is no right wrong answer. And it depends
I'm
on
not asking you for the right or wrong answer. I'm just asking like how you would justify it to yourself after you tore them to shreds.
It would be as a form of retribution.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyone else?
But
I
how
wouldn't
does
do
it?
I couldn't.
Can I ask you?
Wait, hang on, Bruce. What did you say?
I couldn't justify it.
Right.
Yeah, me either.
I would be when my moral foundation would have me answering to my God, and I would have to tell him that my justice was more important than his, and that would be very hard for me. And I would say, no, I would advise not to act on that under my moral foundation.
Interesting. Now, Shinigami, you were trying to get in?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what the point of that is. Like, what do you expect from that, Jolly?
Yeah.
What do I expect?
Or anyone else? Yeah.
Well, for me, it's the retributional side is satisfied. That's all. That's the point of the justice. When we're talking about consequentialism, there's several ways to approach that train. So how do we stop that from happening again, and also satisfy, the wrong party? I mean, I don't think in any situation.
I do want to say real quick.
So is it only?
It's not justice.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah. But
wait, hang on.
Also,
Shinagami, you finish, and then I want to hear where Scott was going. And how do you pronounce your fucking name to begin with?
Shinigami.
Shinigami. Okay.
Shinigami.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, so it's just to fulfill this feeling in the moment, or the retribution, like just to feel. Yeah, I just want to understand, like, what's the point of that? Like, what do you expect from that? Like, only the feeling? Is it only for the feeling, or?
I think it's also a deterrent, too, right?
In my mind, at least, if there's a couple things that I had to think about, especially when I was going into this. But if this person in whatever fucking rape career that they're having are capable of tying a fully grown man up in a chair and raping a child to death in front of them, they probably have done that once or twice beforehand. And so within my moral foundation, not only would I be getting the vengeance part of it, but I would also be completely stopping and making sure there was 100% certainty that nobody else would have to go through what I had to go through and what my child had to go through.
And if the question was asked to me, the other point is that when you're talking about what does this achieve, I mean, I don't really think if you're looking at a deterministic model, anything really achieves anything. If we run by the hard determinist model, if the person's going to commit more crimes, they're going to commit more crimes. If you have the internally coherent view,
but you have in determinism.
Hang on. I just want to say one thing, and then we'll get Scott in. Jolly, I think everyone's talking, within the bounds of the illusion of free will right now. I don't think anyone's saying that they can disrupt what's already determined. But Scott, go ahead.
Well, first off, to that point, when you get into a really sticky situation when you say based off determinism, because determinists also could say, well, this is the last time they kill anybody, so they're never ever going to do this again, regardless of what you do.
Yeah.
You don't know. You truly can't know that. But then back to the bigger point, retribution and justice are sort of diametrically opposed, right? Retribution is a matter of it's something that's an emotional response, as where justice fundamentally has to be dispassionate. Do you know what I'm saying?
What
Like
is
the
who are you talking to?
I was talking to you, Jolly. Like the justice system, fundamentally, to get justice, it has to be dispassionate. It can't be like,
Sure.
These people feel this way about this. But when you look at retribution is fundamentally an emotional response. So those two things, in my opinion, are diametrically opposed.
Well, I think again we have to look at the concept of justice too. I mean, retributional justice is a form of justice, and it is practiced in many countries around the world. And the point is that, again, we're going through presuppositions which mandate our sense of justice and our sense of consequence and our sense of moral foundations as a collective. We say, what's the point of this? What's the point of that? I mean, at the end of the day, I think the presuppositions we're going with are defining where we took from that moral sense. I don't think there is any inherent objective idea of justice or morality. And when you're constructing these ideas, you have to identify that and admit that this is not some universal law that one must not be retributive.
That's totally fine. We could even take that line of reasoning and we can say, well, what's the better if we recognize that morality is completely subjective?
Yes.
What's better? Are we going to take the morality that people had 2,000 years ago, or the morality that people have today? I mean, to me, that in itself is a pretty clear cut.
And on that note, I would, if the question was to me, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and if that happened to my 15-year-old daughter, first off, if at any point I'm left in a room with that guy, he's getting fucked up. I wouldn't kill him. He's getting fucked up. Number two, I would want him in a room with me for a very long time, and I'm talking months, if not years, to feel what I feel. And it would be therapeutic to me whether he gets it or not, because I know my daughter would want me to move forward with my life and not be in a position where she feels like I need to go get that, and it would be for the sake of her that would heal me, because that's what modern psychology that I work off of, that I see is best for me, which is where the words rehabilitation come through. It's not rehabilitation for him just per se, it's rehabilitation for all parties.
I mean, I just.
So I want you to rerun what the punishment was again. I didn't quite hear that part. He was to be left in a room with you to feel what you feel.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would show up on a monthly basis and let him know fucking how I feel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Everybody who's a parent would feel that way. But that's the thing, regardless of whether you feel that way, to say that that's justice, I just don't think that's the case. That's my breaking point. And if we're talking about ideas and not just feelings, there has to be that differentiation there.
I don't think that's justice.
So can I raise a point there
I don't
as well?
think that's justice.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing how it's not justice necessarily.
Justice to me is letting the rest of the world know that evil exists. That's all that justice means to me.
This is extremely the difficulty here is what is agreeing upon objective justice, and then justice requires an objective. It requires it.
Yeah.
Justice requires an objective presupposition.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's subjective justice. I don't think in the United States, the justice system has a fundamental epistemological center when it makes decisions, and that's the Constitution. That is the highest order. So what is the objective standard? Is it the Constitution? Is it nothing? Because if there's nothing, then justice is relative, and then it can't be used to make an odd claim.
Well, that sort of is the foundation of the United States of America too, right? So we recognize we're a nation of laws, and like frontier justice is not justice because it's not conforming to us being a nation of laws. And in any other nation that's ever existed that has not been a nation that's been based upon like the fundamental bedrock of like, here are these specific laws that we're laying down, like all sorts of things can go wrong with it. Even
that's kind of what happened with Rome. So
Yeah,
Rome was
exactly.
like the only head, but they gave everyone all sorts of independence leeway so long as you didn't blaspheme the throne, right? Or speak against Rome. But otherwise you were left to whatever was occurring in your own individual situation, so long as you paid your taxes to the to the Caesar. So but here we have a much different sense of order. And that order is sworn in, and everyone that takes office swears to uphold the Constitution.
Yes. And that's the thing with the United States. Like we saw with like other previous countries, they were based around ideas as opposed to laws, and that's why like the founding fathers made the statement, "We're a nation of laws," right? So it was laying a fundamental groundwork of saying, here's the bedrock of how we need to behave.
They had a constitution of which that is the highest order of the land.
Yes.
Swore to an oath on the Bible. Right. That's how so like the Bible being the ultimate form of morality applied through the ultimate highest law of the land, the Constitution. So that's the way that they had their objective standard.
Oh, well, for some, I mean, like obviously
for the entirety of the United States Supreme Court justice and every other office, that was how they were sworn in.
Well, I don't think people were sworn in on the Bible back.
Yeah, 100%. They were. Yep, that's how they had to. That was the way that they proved they were be honest or legit or took it seriously in that time. And it still happens in some places in the U.S. And I think even the president does that.
Well, because we know right off the bat, certain people like Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were not.
Ben Franklin didn't hold office that way.
Ben Franklin never held office, but right. he was a very big part of that whole process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a person that informed their philosophical and cultural basis, but the people that held office had their standard that they were held to, which is the Constitution and the Bible.
Yeah, and this I think this conversation actually gets back to what I was saying. I think when you don't have an anchor, like if you have an anchor like Bruce clearly does, he can say this is objectively true, then we're all really we can't reference time and space, in my opinion, into making a more correct statement. I mean, if morals don't exist, I think they don't exist now, they don't exist before, they didn't exist 1,000 years in the future.
But I use well-being instead of God's word.
It's only insofar as you can test, experiment, and examine. So until that time comes, then you have to either defer to some other option or just let that play out until you have evidence.
We are, right? And that's why we have due process. That's why we have justices. That's why we have courts that are constantly... The objective standard is that they're pragmatic to our society, which is why they constantly change. So the standard is are they pragmatic? Are we setting precedents? Because the way we think is ever so changing. I mean, the consistency of the way your generation and the generation thinks, right, is inconsistent with the rest of the world 200 years ago for thousands of years. And we now work off different methods of secularism, science, and other ways that are better pragmatic and better, I guess.
Pragmatism is the only order,
better at accuracy for predicting our future.
I know we have a really good topic.
It does help into interpretation of the objective standard and having practical examples of such things, but how that's applied is still based in the objective standard that is interpreted in the law of the land.
Go ahead, Bo. What'd you have there?
Oh, no, you probably heard my kid screaming in the background. She's pissed. I'm trying to put her to bed.
He took this conversation too seriously.
My kid's mad.
Yeah, I know. We have a good topic going when I see most of the room is unmuted. I like that.
Everyone wants to kill each other.
Everyone now wants to execute each other. Based
We
on
used to have a
what
swift way of
standard?
doing this a long time ago, and it was a firing squad or a guiotine.
May 1st,
and then we
I
didn't have to
volunteer.
sit in jail for that long.
I volunteer as tribute.
Oh God.
What is that? Isn't that
I
Hunger
wanted
Games?
to, Mace, can you outline, have you thought through the details of how this would work? Like if you were to, you know, have it normalized across all penitentiaries that you would, you know, have slaves working, like would they be out in the community in chains? Maybe chained to someone's field and they have to work it and grow crops or whatever.
I'd imagine. I'd imagine it depends on exactly how dangerous they are, but
Okay.
most likely what would happen is we'd just have to turn the prisons into factories and keep them indoors.
Oh, okay. So they would build things that the people who they committed a crime against, or you know, their descendants or whatever, or whoever's left, whoever gets their will. So all of the money they would generate with their work would go to those people?
No, it would just go towards the state, I suppose.
Oh, okay. I thought like if someone committed a crime against you, they have to work in the factory while they're in jail, and all that revenue goes to them. But
I would say the parties
because that would be unfair on the victims, because they might get stuck with a lazy one, and then they're making less money than another victim.
just some
Fucking hot take over here.
Just some fat fuck that only wants to play World of Warcraft.
Unfortunately, far too common. I think the affected parties would be the ones that would be owed the restitution.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
So
yeah. And that,
whichever
I
parties
think,
are involved. You know.
I guess that's the issue too. I mean, like,
Of course, you can figure
we,
that out.
we often say that, you know, they should just, you know, adult up and, you know, start just deal with it themselves. I mean, like, I'm just not seeing what any victim or any party, the victim party, has to gain from the due process and the court system and all that jazz.
What do you mean? What do you mean that
they also don't have anything to gain from going and killing other people, right?
Well, they're not killing anybody, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of, like, what's in it for them? Like, what is the
what's the catharsis, the restitution?
There's no
it restores both parties.
Like just because something terrible happens doesn't mean everybody's ever going to become whole again. I mean, that's in life, man.
But I mean,
well,
what would be the incentive for them to go and seek justice rather than take justice into their own hands? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's like imagine how many people Genghis Khan, like how many groups of people he took over. Did any of those people ever get justice? No, but like
that's right, and that's terrible.
They weren't living under our moral code now, or our legal system. We have the ability to actually pay that back now.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying there has to be a differentiation between like using like moral codes from 2,000 years ago into the moral codes that we're using now.
I mean, I don't really think the death penalty has to be necessarily an emotionally grounded response. I mean, it can be a purely pragmatic one. You've taken somebody who's shown that they're willing to harm random citizens for no reason at all. You're taking them out of the equation. It's that simple. And you're potentially providing catharsis to the families of the victims too. Because I know a lot of families are going to want people to be fucking dealt with in a lethal manner. Like them being alive, sitting in a jail cell is not going to be good enough for the families.
Yeah,
and I don't blame them.
So what if we could learn things from that person who killed that family that we can prevent 10 other families being killed from people like that person?
Well, what if you can't? What if you're just wasting taxpayer money and you're wasting
and we don't know. So do you just want to err on the side of like being like, oh, let's just kill all these people?
I would err on the side of what would provide the most catharsis to the people who have actually suffered from the actions of that individual.
Exactly.
That's a bad.
I would say yours is a bad way to do it. I would say yours isn't taking the big.
No. Basing justice on catharsis is.
We're not basing it off of catharsis. I'm saying that's a happy side effect. I'm not saying that it's not the ultimate goal. That the ultimate goal isn't catharsis. The ultimate goal is removing that person from the equation permanently. All right, that's my taking on it.
And consequentially, that suffices the same thing. If you don't want any more people to be hurt from that person, consequentially, the most surefire way to do that is to do that.
I'm not saying murder. I'm not saying murder. I'm not saying every single person who commits a crime. I'm saying only for the most severe crimes. I'm not saying, oh, that guy stole a piece of bread. Yeah, shoot him in the head. No.
No, of course not. Yeah, I'm saying, yeah.
I think you should shoot him in the head. Fucking bread thief.
That's the point for like when people who commit these most severe crimes, there's something probably psychological going on there. And this is something the FBI has like worked with people since like the 1950s, and they've developed techniques and methods where we've actually been able to stop people from doing the same kind of killings, like through what we've learned from that, right? So how do you even weigh that beneficial factor against this idea of being like, oh well, they did something bad, we need to kill them because they can never do anything good. And that person themselves, they might not be able to do anything good, but through our understanding them, other people might be able to do good based off studying these people, right? I think that's a pretty recognized position. I don't think that's crazy.
I didn't say it was crazy. I just said I don't personally agree with it. But exactly, I mean, that's fine. If it works for you, it works for you. I'm not saying you're wrong.
No, I'm not saying it works for me. I'm saying look at like FBI agents who, like, when they caught like people like John Wayne Gacy, those FBI agents spent like months, years, decades studying this guy.
Getting fed a line of bullshit by John Wayne Gacy. It wasn't a lot of what they learned wasn't applicable because a lot of it was horseshit.
But they learned to that horse shit, though. That's the thing. Like, if you've ever,
that's the thing. They're still picking apart what the horse shit is. They still haven't deciphered what exactly he fed them that was true and not. They have some that they know is true, but not a good portion of it.
Well, exactly. But it also comes down to the psychology of that person as well. So this person's feeding you horse shit, and then that in of itself becomes like a clue.
That's the problem. They still haven't fully deciphered what the horseshit is. They're still trying to figure out, hey, what exactly was true and what wasn't.
We haven't deciphered what gravity is yet, right?
Sure.
And also, I don't know how much that can really affect in terms of, unique crimes too. I mean, psychopaths usually, we're saying that they all derive the same functions from their psychology. They don't have any uniqueness to their, individual crimes, motivations, brain function, all that sort of stuff. I think crime is way too varied too, and also then we're prioritizing certain things over others anyway. I mean, if we live in the free market of ideas, the free marketplace of ideas, that cost benefit analysis just doesn't suffice. I mean, for some people, like our friend before, like me, was saying, like, for you that may be something that's worth the cost to
Yeah, but other people, you don't know what the benefit is, though. So, like, how can you even make an ROI claim when you don't know what?
I guess neither of us do, I suppose. But I think it's
exactly. So, like, what I'm saying is, I'm just saying let's err on the side where we might get something extremely beneficial out of this. And if we just start fucking killing people willy-nilly, just taking them out, like, we don't know what we might have lost.
Nobody argued for killing willy-nilly either. So
yeah, well, I mean, let's look at the Nuremberg Trials, for example. I mean, those people certainly got the sharp end of the stick when it came to that. I mean, what did killing them ever achieve for anybody? Like, they just died, and the people that taken care of had already died, and
they just died, and
Nivik, make sure you mute, buddy. You gotta kill the YouTube stream.
Feedback.
I just want to get in. We got some new people. We've had a lot of different perspectives on the death penalty today. Let's hear from Gelbrecht. Gelbrecht, what do you think about the death penalty?
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a huge opinion of it. I'm like 50-50. I guess the only take I would do on it is that I think in general this seems to be I think there's a huge bias in to be against the death penalty, because you can always argue, that it's essentially a crime against humanity to kill another human being, and you play that card, and it's always possible to do that. I think to just to play on that argument, and then you can essentially ignore the rest of politics, because then you can just argue, from a human level, from a human standpoint, I think it's wrong to kill other people, and therefore it should be wrong. And then you can just dismiss the whole conversation based on that. I think there could be an argument for it in certain situations where that you have a person that can't fit into society.
Why
Because
do
they
you
are just,
sound like you think that's a cop out if they say that?
what's a cop out?
Like they're cheating, they're not really engaging in the conversation as intended.
Oh, Gilbrick's here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Didn't
you
see
could
him.
say not engaging in conversation. I think you're not engaging in the yeah. I guess you could say that. Yeah.
But they
Good
can't
fellas.
help it. If their moral foundation says that killing is wrong no matter what, then what else can they say?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty much closing down conversation, I think. So because it just makes it very simplistic, I think.
It's not closing down the conversation. That's their answer.
Some people just believe that, and that's totally fine. Quakers truly do believe killing anybody for any situation, no matter what, is wrong. Period. Word stop.
Quakers. Let's check in with Doolittle. Doolittle, you had an interesting. I want to hear. You wrote about what we would do if we had the technology, or how would we feel about having the technology of being able to edit someone's mind or the hardware.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, that's a weird hypothetical. So whether you have the death penalty in society, I think it depends on what alternatives you have, right? And what kind of resources you have to manage a prison population. So I think most people would rather not kill people if they could get away with not killing people, right? But if we had let's just say higher rates of murder and less resources to spend on our prison system, it would make a lot more sense to kill people for murder than it does today, where the marginal cost of the next inmate isn't really all that high compared, considering the numbers that we have, right? But if it was a lot higher relative cost, then we would start looking for alternatives other than incarceration, and maybe the best trade-off right now is trying to rehabilitate people.
This is what I was sort of getting into before with we're running into an investment battle. So no position then is right or wrong morally. We're talking about pure economic incentive. So if we're talking about an incentive,
I don't think. I think. Let me finish, because I'm trying to answer Travis's question and why I posed the position that I did. So there's an economic question, right? And if you're trying to maximize well-being, you can spend $200,000 a year on housing an inmate, or you could spend $200,000 a year on sending 10 kids to college, right? And so which one of those do you think maximizes well-being? Keeping a guy in prison and letting him stay alive in prison, or 10 kids needing to go to college? And I think the 10 kids getting to go to college is more important than one murderer staying alive in incarceration.
Well,
So
hang on
that's
a minute.
just my.
You do need to account for the cost of execution as well if you're going to execute.
Well, it doesn't really cost. I mean, hanging doesn't really cost anything, but it doesn't cost anywhere near $200,000, and it's not an ongoing cost. It's a one-time. So anyway, the question that I have is, as an alternative to
I actually
or
think
incarceration,
an executioner would have to be paid quite a lot, because that's not an easy job.
Right, but I mean, 200,000. It's 200,000 per person per year to keep them on death row.
Scott,
so I mean, that you're not paying an executioner $20 million a year. You're paying them 50 to 100,000, right? So it's way cheaper to kill them. But anyway, so my point is, in looking for an alternative that's more humane, aside from killing them, and maybe a little bit, rehabilitation is an interesting thing, but you don't really know if whatever program you're doing that takes years and years is rehabilitating. So I came up with this hypothetical, maybe futuristic. Let's say in the realm of possibilities, what if you could wipe a person's brain and like do a hard like format hard drive on somebody's brain, on somebody's memories, on somebody's built up experiences, and reprogram them with something that that doesn't cause them to be psychopath. Let's just say that we know the person had had a past life that caused them to be overly aggressive and violent, and maybe it's just a tumor, right? And then you operate on the tumor, and that'll solve some number of them. Yeah, right. But if it's actually a person's built up life experiences that turns them into a murderer, or somebody that would make that decision to murder or murder again, then maybe there could be some technology, especially if you're talking once we get human brain interfaces. Once we get machine brain interfaces, maybe we can wipe someone's memory. In the case of instead of giving someone the death penalty, give them the format C: on the old brain. What do you guys think about that? Is that worse than the death penalty or better?
Well, you'd have to then to say, what distinguishes an individual? Is it their DNA, or is it their brain's chemistry, or brain's contents? Because the individual would still be at fault.
Yeah, I want to approach the statement that you made at the initiation of your conversation. You're talking about the amount of people and the amount of cost for people on death row. What percentage of the entire population of the United prison system do you think is on death row? I just pulled up.
Oh, it's very low. It's very low. There's 700 in California right now, right? So
0.0014.
Right. So it's like the vaccines.
So the average cost. I mean, that's just in California. There's 700. So it's $200,000 per person, and just getting out my calculator. 700 times 200,000 is 140 million per year. Right? But if it costs $20,000 to send a kid to college, then the cost of California's prison system is 7,000 college educations.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I get to
year.
It seems like what's happening right now is we're sort of getting off the topic. We're talking about death penalty once we start getting into the topic of the economics of the prison system. So the
I think they're related.
It's entirely important.
They're quasi-related, but I think the amount
just his motivation.
Well, like think about this. Think about somebody who's like a serial thief, right? And every time they go and steal something, get put in jail for a year, they get out, they get caught again, get put in jail for a year. The amount of court cost and everything to go through that entire process, I guarantee you, is a fuckload. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars just for that every time it happens, right? So it's to try and break these things down.
Well, that's kind of what whataboutism.
The reason why it's related, though, is because it's like this. That is how Doolittle is, or I mean, maybe it's justifying his position on the death penalty. So it's not necessarily unrelated. It's just his justification.
And my foundation there explains why societies that don't have the kind of resources invested in the prison system are going to have more. I think are going to be more likely to have the death penalty because they're not just going to.
And that's what you're talking about with Gal.
Lifelong.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about with Gal. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So it's like if we go back to a old age's kingdom, like somebody commits murder, like they don't have freaking giant prison systems to put murderers in, and murder was way more prevalent. So they would have just had
death, exile, or slavery.
Death, exile, or slavery, and they wouldn't just say like lifelong incarceration as an option. And we kind of have that as an option, but I think people don't realize what the actual cost is of this lifelong incarceration system that we have. You talk about
crazy.
someone that's incarcerated for 20 years, it's costing like $4 million per person that we keep, keep incarcerated.
But here's
also,
here's
can I
here's
jump
the
in
thing
with
that's also never taken into account. Like, and I brought up Angola earlier. So if you're not familiar with that prison in Louisiana, and like Mediaire, Louisiana, basically the way it works is like these prisoners these prisoners work on this giant farm, and they get paid about like 10 cents a day. So it's not technically not considered slavery because they're getting 10 cents a day, but the amount of money that they're making off it, that's not equal. Like when they do the numbers, they don't equate the amount of money being made into the cost. Right. So you can look at this one specific prison and be like, oh, well, it costs us $3 million this year. But then we can look at like all the crops and everything, and those crops are just 3.5 million. So those prisoners aren't actually they aren't actually costing us any money. They're actually contributing to the overall value of the economy. And these are kind of things that like it's never accounted for, and until something like that is accounted for, I don't know how we can even have a legitimate economic conversation about prisoner populations if we're not talking about the economic increases that are made by these people in these populations that are not accounted for.
Those aren't significant enough to make a difference in the large swath of jails and prisons across the entirety of the United States.
Oh man, but
and they
county
don't actually they don't actually pay for themselves.
Yeah,
But
Cutter's
actually,
right.
it's a net economic loss because, and here's why: because most systems have these what they call correctional industries, and they manufacture whatever it is. It's sometimes furniture, sometimes it's agricultural products. All of those things have a net loss to the economy because they undercut the private sector market. And we've had
no, not necessarily.
Yes, they
have
yes,
to by
they
default.
Do.
No,
yes, they do because they are because that labor and that infrastructure is subsidized by the state.
Everything's subsidized by the state. My
No,
man.
This is 100% in this case.
Listen,
how about letting people?
I happen to know how this works because I've. And it is absolutely the opposite. It's counterintuitive what everybody thinks it is. One, because they don't get paid a minimum wage; they get paid a few bucks a day at the most. And the only way that this works that doesn't cause economic harm in the private sector is if it is for some industry like Habitat for Humanities, where you have inmates building furniture and houses that are donated for homeless or folks. But it's still there. Once you have the state, regardless of what type of infrastructure it is, competing with the private sector, it's always a net loss.
No, you're making a mistake there, because basically what happens in these situations is private sector buys the products that the state is making. In the private sector, they can still charge the same price for these products that they're getting from these prison systems so they have to pay a lower cost, these prison systems, but they're getting the same price when they sell it. So you can make an argument that maybe it's detrimental to the specific labor force in these specific areas.
Definitely.
You cannot make the argument that it's a negative in the entire economic system. But that's
the price of goods and resources are no longer subjected to their standard competitive rate. So they're now subjected to the subsidized labor that has ruined the labor supply. Right? They're not able to compete for the same dollars for the same amount of work.
Oh yeah, but it has nothing to do with now. Like, I mean, this kind of shit goes back to the 1950s, dude. I mean,
but it's not. In other words, though, it's not an economic win, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't see this being. I don't see the that portion of the prisons to be an economic win. Also, if you were to add up the dollars made from the prison system,
it's not an economic loss though either. I mean, that's a thing.
I think it is because of the well. It's not a loss because it's not. There's not a. I mean, it's not significant because there's not enough of them. But if this were rolled out, it would be a massive loss. I mean, it's just less quantity. But if you were to scale this up to the size of the American public or the American prison system at large, it would be a major problem.
Oh man!
Plus the amount of corruption that happens within these.
Even that aside, I mean that happens everywhere. Yeah, that's the aside.
Yeah,
but I mean,
it's been a monumental disaster here in the state that I live in.
Yeah,
for a long time, and there's.
Yeah, the prison industrial complex. I agree with you 100% on that. I'm just saying I'm thinking about it in different terms than where you're coming from. But if you're saying it's been a massive loss for everybody, yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and the death penalty would not be.
Oh no, I think the death penalty would be though.
Well, it would depend on how swift it was, and you could make an argument that it's a loss morally. And then you'd have to start making discussions around how you can quantify that.
Well, like even before, like I mean, I've talked to you, Bruce, and you at one point, I don't know how much you actually believe it, but you're talking about like public executions, like, and then think about that in the same sense of just having like porn. You know, we're talking
it's
about
tiny, public execution would be for the public execution would just have been the norm at one point, right?
Yeah. But it
would be few and far between and swift, right? It would be public as a deterrent, but few and far between and swift. So I don't think you would,
No, I just remember like his one time when I first came on, I think you were just fucking around, but you're right. It's like, yeah, dude, let's fucking put everybody up in gallows, fucking let's just get it.
Get it over with.
Well, I mean, in some case, it's sort of tongue in cheek, but it would be more efficient economically than some of the ways we go about things now. And arguably easier.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. I don't think like economics should come down to life and death, really. Right?
I think they do, though. Fundamentally, they do, right? Because that's how people act.
Well,
I think we should be striving towards more life, though, and more life of even somebody who's a murderer, if we can get them to stop murdering, and get them to live, let's just say, the second half of their life in a productive manner. Like most of the people that are on death row are there or in life prison sentences are there because they made bad judgments in their juvenile years. Like people that are relatively, most of them are people with relatively low intelligence levels and a lot of testosterone, and they weren't in the best situation in life, and they just made some bad judgment calls. And like, does that mean that we have to throw away the whole rest of their life? I mean, I don't think so. If we have a way as society to figure out how to let's just say isolate them for long enough so that they turn, when they turn 30, most people calm down.
Well, if society is the only, so the question is, are we concerned about the individual? Or are we concerned about society?
Yeah. Well, the individual's like
part of society.
Your society is only as good as how you treat the worst among us.
So Censor showed up. Maybe he can say something.
Just before we go to Censor, I just need to get the Nivekian unit in. Nivek, lay it on us. Death penalty.
No, I like what Doctor's saying.
Okay.
In where he was saying it depends on how the infrastructure is, and either you probably have to conclude on killing, but I mean if you but in a way he's arguing, well, no, you shouldn't kill if you have the capability not to and change the person, and it depends on the person too, because like when you're talking about the Dylan down. So you don't know if like some people, they're negative, and when you deal with them, you more get a net, you get a loss, instead of a gain. So you cut them out. You don't interact with them anymore because that's just the type of person
That's the way that, and how that person is. So some people, they are ideologically that way. It's like they have an ideological belief in how can I get over on, how can I F over. It's just ingrained in their character, and they have a belief of harming a person at their loss in expense for their gain. So,
all right.
I mean, like, how do you interact with the? It's just so we do this every day with people. We cut people out of our lives.
Can I jump in as well? Just
Jolie,
making
you go,
a point
and then I want to hear from Dardan after Jolly. Go ahead, Jolly.
Yeah. So I was going to respond to Doctor's point. I think that's a very interesting one in terms of flawed morality. I think this is the thing. Like before, when we talked about, well, this is just completely off the table. We did this 500 years ago, so it's off the table. I mean, the model he brought forward actually is quite indicative of what I was sort of saying. Is that none of us have any really strong bedrock to tie down our morals to, and then say, well, this is right, this is childish, this you cannot speak of, this is retribution, off the table, vengeance. When you don't have an objective anchor to anchor your morality to, then you, by nature, by definition, you have to be flawed. And I don't think time and space really comes as a factor there. Like what happened 200 years ago and what will happen 200 years in the future is almost irrelevant, because it's not we're not on an objective path to an end goal. There is no end goal when morals aren't relative. There is no progress in that sense, because progress would entail that there was an end goal and we're heading towards that end goal. So that can only happen if there's an objective moral. It can never happen if morality cannot be tied down to any fundamental objective anchor, which is where I agree with Bruce actually. Which if unless you have some kind of an objective morality, you can you're never getting towards or away from any kind of moral system. It's just flawed by definition.
I think not having an objective morality that is celestial, that we can follow, or a guide that we can follow, is what has created such prosperity in the first place. So not having that foundation is what is key in moving forward pragmatically off what works. In some cases, it does cause problems, but in a majority of cases, it helps reduce poverty, helps reduce crime, murder, and allows human life to flourish, I think, a little bit better with the laws that we create.
Can I say something? Can I say one thing to what he just said? He says like we don't, but like if you bump into a person, you kill them. Everybody is on the same level agreement where that's wrong.
Who's
wrong?
Like that's. Did they? You mean I'm just saying if they meant to bump them?
Well, I'm saying how we are in a society. We come to a way of being on the same page in governing and saying, okay, this. We conclude that if you do this, then you get this charge or you get this punishment. In going to jail or paying a fine. You know what I mean? We conduct ourselves like that every day. So yeah, I get it. Like everything's subjective, but we still reason with each other and come to some type of agreement. It might not be perfect, but I mean it's just the best you got to go about things.
Yeah.
Well, again,
so you can't just walk because a guy bump into you, you just kill him because that pissed you off. People say, okay, we be on the same page. That's wrong.
Okay.
And we approach how to deal with that person.
Yep.
And punishing them.
Okay, thanks, Nivik. I really want to try to get Dardan in here. Dardan, what do you got? What do you think of the conversation so far? If Dardan's mic is working. If not, well, let's go to Censor.
Talking about Pete Travis?
No. There's someone named Dardan in the room right now.
Oh, I was like, why is he calling me Dardan? Like,
that's our new special.
Dardan Turd.
That's our new
Dardan
special
Turd.
name for Don. Dardan.
Well, their name is Dardan Turd. Their censors was next.
Yes.
Don, what do you got, buddy?
Wait, hang on. I want to go to
Censor.
I want to go to Censor first.
I like Dardan actually.
Yeah, that's great. Censor, what do you got? What's your position on the death penalty?
Well, I'm for it, but I would say also that you have to frame up who the people are that you. And I use that word loosely, frame up, but you have to have a framework for what defines a person who has or activities that have exited the value that they could possibly provide or recompense that they could possibly provide in their offense. So, and that means also that somebody that accidentally kills somebody, say in a car accident, you murdered somebody, or maybe you were even being negligent at the time and you murdered somebody. There's intent that also has to be measured. There's a lot of things that go into people that end up on death row.
Yeah.
Or currently and should be into the future. But I think that unless we have a technological or mechanism by which some of the others discussed that could wipe people to a certain degree, but that doesn't make them unaccountable. They should still spend the rest of their days in a prison. At best case scenario, should never be allowed to enjoy the life after they took somebody else's heinously or in some capacity. How would you have to put yourself on the receiving end of that if it was your child, your mother, your wife, or husband that was heinously murdered by somebody who doesn't care that they did it, and they get to go about doing something else with the rest of their life while you're just stuck with that as a value proposition for all of humanity. That's not going to sit well. That's not going to sit well.
And also, Censor, how can you reconcile with that, though? Anybody who might be wrongfully accused, right?
So I would say also, and I like that you bring that up, because that is a definite, that's a definite issue. You want to know that the person that you're executing is the right person. And I'm not sure that we have in place currently standards that would sufficiently mitigate that possibility. That's not to say that we don't know for sure that we do have the right people in a lot of instances, but I think that more effort has to go into mitigating that being a possibility at all. And I think that if there was a question about it in any way, stretch, or form, that the death penalty should be on the case. But I understand different states and different laws and DA I work differently. So
can I make it also a case for human sentimentalism here? I think this is something that hasn't been brought out. I think as a rationalist society, we do place huge emphasis on pure rationality, but we all know that none of us are automatons, robots that can be clicked and said, right, this is the rational thing, you do this. Don't forget about emotions. Emotions have no place. And to actually eliminate that is in itself, I feel in an intuitive sense, as somebody that's favorable to moral sentimentalism of Hume, as a pure just assault on a huge aspect of humanity. It's like, oh, you guys have emotions, they're just emotions, bypass them on the path to pure rationality. And who's making those calls as well? Subjects that are obviously neutral, don't have emotional investment in the case, are saying don't be emotional, and it's kind of feels like a tautology from somebody that's in the victim's shoes. Okay, because everyone else is gathered around and said don't be childish, don't be emotional, this is not rational, this is not useful for the rest of us. Therefore, your emotions, your sentiments have zero value, and we'll prioritize rationality, pure rationality, over, even if it was purely rational, which I'm not, for a second don't think it is. There is no rational foundations for morality, but even if there were, I think just wiping out the whole aspect of human beings, which is called emotions or sentiments, is, I think, tragic, if nothing else.
Guys,
I don't think anybody's making that argument. It's more about the argument. It's like we all recognize that there are these emotional aspects there, but when you're making a decision that's going to determine whether somebody lives or dies, I think you owe a little bit more to that decision than just saying, "Hey, this is how I feel about it." Right?
Yeah, I want to.
Pretty big.
I want to get Don in. Don, views on the death penalty.
Is it okay if I give maybe like a short expose? It might be a little
Yes.
long. I don't know, but
No. Do it.
I think
do
it's
it.
necessary.
Read up, buddy.
So when I think and conceive of the death penalty, I think
I'm just kidding, Dan. Go ahead. I'm totally kidding. Sorry. I was just snoring. Sorry. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry. I want to hear
so
what you have to say.
one of the things that I think is important to look into. We have to look at first of all the historical foundations of the death penalty, and then we have to look at kind of like how it's been modernized. So one of the first things that we look at, especially in the United States, and we look at the history of the death penalty. One of its main justifications was to take blood feuds away from communities and tribes, and moving for the federal government. So one of the things that you would see is that it was very commonplace for there to be blood feuds between people. Well, he killed my uncle and he raped my daughters, and I'm gonna kill him. So the state kind of had to take that onus on themselves and do that rather than it be wild and there'll be blood feuds happening. That's one of the historical foundations. And another one comes from this archaic vision that we have of justice. Right? We even still have the symbolism up today. We have this blind woman holding a scale. Well, there's no real metaphysical justice that we're solving, right? There's not like, oh, it's fair to kill him because he intentionally killed another person. This cosmic idea of balancing the scales is simply a mythology that has carried us through all the way from ancient Egypt. When we look at Anubis weighing people's hearts against feathers and such, and this type of concept of balancing the scales, solving a right with a wrong, solving a wrong with a right, or whatever it might be that we're trying to do. So I think that when we think of policy and when we think of how our government ought to function, we want the most successful policy that reduces murder rate, makes prisons have lower recidivism rates, and that are the most cost effective. Those are all the things we try to look at. The thing we look at the death penalty, off the bat, we know that it is extremely financially ineffective. The second thing we see, that it doesn't actually deter crimes. When you look at countries that have death penalty versus those who don't, you don't see a change in crime rate. When you look at countries who had death penalty and then stopped, or didn't and then added on death penalty, there's no significant reduction, statistically significant anything when it comes to crimes that would be under the death penalty. So we already see that doesn't function. And when we look at prisons and the culture of prisons, our aim should be not this mythologized idea of balancing the scales. It should be about rehabilitation. Now, earlier someone brought up the families and the families who deal with it. And this is true. This is a problem because many families want that revenge, right? Like we go back to the way blood feuds and how the government kind of took the place of people doing it, so there wouldn't be any of these generational blood feuds. I think the solution there with the revenge that people take is one that is fostered in our history, which is, talked about as turn the other cheek, redemption. We want to look at redemption. And putting someone in prison to the point of redemption and trying to rehabilitate them to go back into society, I think is the utmost goal that we should aim for. So overall, I'm against the death penalty. I think there's better options out there. The only time I can conceive the death penalty is possible or necessary is someone who is above rehabilitation. Someone who not only cannot be rehabilitated, but harms the ability of other people for rehabilitation. And that's the only place I see the death penalty necessary.
Yeah. I would say in response to that you made a lot of good points, and I'm not going to try to run down them.
I agree.
But I would say that the death penalty is not supposed to be a deterrent. It's a penalty, not a deterrent. If somebody is up for has committed some, at least in current state, we'll examine current state, not hypothesize a future state, but in current status, if you're on a death penalty case, there's a reason why the death penalty is even allowed to be brought up. and it's never touted on, publicly or utilized, at least not that I've seen. I'm sure some governor somewhere said, come to our state and do this, we'll kill you. But it's not meant to be a deterrent, because think of how few, I don't know about California. I heard somebody say 700 people in California, but it's not meant to do that. Hence, they really focus on those cases that meet the requirement to even be prosecuted at that level. There's a lot of stringent requirements on any state to give somebody death. So it's not meant to be a deterrent. And
why the penalty? Why do it to begin with?
Can I actually come up here as well?
Yeah, I have to go in like 2 minutes. I just want to say something real quick.
Yeah.
You made the distinction that like there shouldn't be this sort of blind justice idea, cosmic justice, of leveling scales. But the fact that you're making a claim about what should happen, and you said should a lot of times, shows that you have an inherent sense of what is justice anyway. We're just arguing about what is justice, not the fact that it does indeed exist as an ought.
No, I'm discounting the concept of justice.
But you're making that assumption anyway.
No, I'm not saying we're making justice. I don't believe in the concept.
You're just changing the term then, because you're still asking people to do something that's not occurring for some better benefit based on what has already occurred.
If we define justice, and that's why I don't consider it. If I'm redefining justice as that which is good for society, that's all I care about. I don't care about justice.
Yeah, but you're still saying something that is good for society based on something that is bad.
Justice isn't defined as that which is good for society.
Of course, it's the way that you make weights and measures that occur when you're making decisions is the same sort of weights and measures that's being made in justice. That's why it's scales. You're making a determination based on a scale.
Not a metaphysical, theological one, but balancing a cosmic
Well, it doesn't
scale.
matter. It doesn't matter if you can't balance the cosmic scale as an individual agent anyway. But also, but you're acting as though that does exist, or at least acting as though there's an ought that you must strive to be that would level that scale.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to level any scales.
Justice is nothing more than a collective value judgment. That is all it is, and we have to make that. You don't really have a choice whether or not you want to.
Sorry, I got to go. I'll talk to you later, Dan.
Whether or not anybody wants to believe that our system is better or shouldn't exist, or the concept shouldn't exist, it really matters not, because as a living being, you have to make a value judgment about everything that you do or don't do. And when we make collective value judgments, like we do in, say, death penalty cases, that is a collective value judgment that is made. We have to do that. We don't really get the choice to walk away from it. We can remove options from the table, but you still have to make a value judgment in what the person's life or person's life, that person that is now on trial, what were those lives worth?
Yeah.
Can I give you another concept about
2 seconds,
how
Jolly. 2 seconds. I have to just break quickly for one of our fake ads, and we'll be back in less than a minute here. Fed up with dirty atheists shitting on Christ? Now introducing the new Bruce mallet of Christian justice. See an atheist? Hit him in the head with a mallet. The mallet of Christian justice. Not endorsed by Pangburn. All right, we're back, guys.
Can I make one?
What in the actual is that?
Go ahead, Jolly.
Okay, so I was going to talk about deterrence. So I can give you an example of where road fines are not a deterrent, actually. And this happens in the Middle Eastern states, where you have certain sultans and sheikhs and the guys that run, I guess, the oil rigs up there, and they got ridiculous levels of money, where they pretty much on purpose break road rules all the time because they just got dinars or whatever, currencies just to flash around. And basically the rules, the deterrents just apply to people who are below the poverty line, or below that threshold of economic influence. So, and that probably applies in America too. A fine of $500
just because we have a point system. if you get caught for like speeding, after a certain amount of points, your license is suspended, whether or not you paid the fine.
Well, I think it's you just buy the money out. Like if you have corruption in the system, or you can just buy it out, then you can work around the system. But what I'm saying, even in the States, like the justice is like the deterrents don't work for all people equally. I mean, if somebody can get away with, but the thing is that with the cost of the lawyers and the cost of the due process and all that sort of stuff, the law is never deterring certain crimes from happening, because you see that with mob bosses. You know, if you got organized crime and you have drug deals, and whereas you have unorganized crime, you're going to have more. The unorganized criminals are going to have more to pay than organized criminals. This is just a fact of the matter. So the deterrence doesn't work against organized crime, which is where it happens the most. So do we banish every aspect of the legal leg because it's not deterring the worst perpetrators, or it's not deterring anybody that really needs to be deterred? So it's a big issue. Like if we're saying deterrence is the function of law.
That's one of the aspects that I think is important to take. So when I think of why should we have the death penalty, I think of all three axes that I brought up. I think of, does it deter the crime? No. Does it is it financially better the way it's done? No. Does it actually solve some sort of quote unquote mythological justice? No. Does the penalty mean anything? I don't see it having any type of meaning other than we just killed someone. I don't see a reason for it except for the one that I outlined. I'm not saying abolish it in the same way that, like, you know, people say, oh, defund the police. That's absurd. Right now, I think that we should move towards a system, one, hopefully that we don't need the death penalty. Right? If we could rehabilitate people and we could actually have a system in place that has low recidivism rates and brings criminals and murderers back into society, that is exactly the one I would want to create. But the one we currently have, and the way the death penalty is currently done, doesn't help any one of these three axes.
So, but
not again, financial, not deterrence, and not some sort of like retributive, quote unquote, mythological justice that humans,
I actually don't know that it's purely methodological. If like you were saying with the example of, you know, the blood feuds that were going on, I mean, these were ongoing, on-ground kind of blood feuds, and they were obviously emanating from human beings acting in a way that they felt was just, or, you know, maybe it was on emotion, who knows. But the point is that the state took it off their hands and basically said, we'll do the same thing as you. So it's not purely cosmic. It's not like a metaphysical claim. These
that's the historical
that were doing this. Yeah.
That's definitely the historical precedent, right?
So we still have those evolutionary tendencies today, and that's where I was coming into the concept of.
Sure, but we have tons of evolutionary. We have tons of evolutionary stuff. What does it matter?
Well,
I kind of see where Jolly's coming from for a minute, because like what he was saying. At what point are you responsible and not responsible? Because you have corruption within the system that's extremely damaging to society. It you know, like with the financial crash, you know, that the effects of that causes a lot of negative outcomes of crime, you know, where people do bad things out of desperation. And what did they do? Nobody got arrested, and everybody not only nobody got arrested, they got fucking rewarded for it.
Yeah.
They got money for it.
Yeah, but I don't see how this has anything to do with
the point.
Let's let Scott get in. Yeah,
because Jolly, like, think about the amount of corruption that took place. Because I know you're a Marxist. Think about the amount of corruption that took place in Lenin and Stalin's reign, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just got home.
What I'm saying is that even under this justice system, though, that's what I'm saying. If deterrent is a systematic thing for organized crime rings, which are probably the majority stakeholders in drug crime and kidnapping, trafficking, all sorts of things. These are all organized rings. They're not deterred by any of our rules. So if deterrence is a thing, then we shouldn't have a legal system at all, because the legal system's not deterring those guys at all, and they're the biggest players in the game.
And that's explicitly where the corruption in Leninism and Stalinism came from, is because they just realized, like, oh well, let's just run these things ourselves. Let's be corrupt ourselves, right?
Yeah, sure. But I'm saying like this is addressing a different point that Dan was bringing.
I
That,
like where you're going, Scott.
If there's no deterrence that's happening in a system, then that penalty is not worthwhile. So I'm trying to ask if the organized rings, like the mafia rings, the crime cartels, the drug cartels, so on and so forth, if they can bypass the law, if they're above the law in the sense that they have the money and infrastructure, and this is supposed to be deterrent policy. If it's a policy of deterrence, then they're not being deterred. They're actually above that deterrence itself.
Can I say
by that
one thing?
metric, we should get rid of drug laws too. We should get rid of kidnapping laws.
Hold on, yeah, so Jolly, you're not talking about deterrence then necessarily, because you can look at like organized crime syndicates, and they're not necessarily worried about deterrent laws the same way as like somebody who's just like a normal person who's like in a society. So like we have like laws that like are going to be specific deterrents, like speed limits, right? And that's why these specific laws are put in place. We know we have the certain amount of information there. It says, okay, well, if people are driving 100 miles through a school area where there's kids walking by, that's probably going to end bad. And if people are 3 times over the legal limit of alcohol consumption they're driving, that's probably going to end bad. So you have specific laws like these that are put into place to be like deterrent laws, right? So that's where that comes from. But then you can also look at like financial laws. Financial laws aren't necessarily being put there as to being deterrents, as more being put there for restitution for the people that they transgress upon, right?
Let me just get a word in for the conclusion where I'm getting at. I see where Scott's coming from is the far extreme of one end of crony capitalism and the far extreme of the other end of communism. They're both bad, and where you could so what you do is you have law, you have rules and laws to apply to both for deterrence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that
I'm saying that if the players that are supposed to be deterred, if they're causing much of the traffic in that crime industry, let's say they own 70% of the game. Like when it comes to the organized crime, they run the crime in the city. They account for majority percentage of the crime. The little guys don't contribute at all, and they're the ones that are the most deterred. But they're the ones that are actually subject to the worst economic inequalities, which forces them into crime in the first place. So the guys that are powerful because of the crime are not being deterred, and the guys that are forced into crime through their living standards or their conditions are the ones that are copying it. And same thing happens in the Middle East, where like the laws, the deterrents only apply to the people.
Well, I would say there's a certain level of deterrence. It's not perfect deterrence. You can't say like, oh, we put these laws in place and these things aren't going to happen anymore. Of course, it's never going to be the case, right? I mean, to expect like we can put one specific law on the books that is specifically meant to be like a deterrent law that's going to end all of these kind of things. That's, I don't know. That's, to me, seems to be wishful thinking. If you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, I was saying, but the players that are the majority, like if we're talking about deterrence, is a deterrence for the 5% of the criminal, the 5% of the actors in the crime industry, or should it be a deterrent for 95%? And how do we weigh up the benefits of the deterrence between any policy if it's not effective on the majority perpetrator class, if you want to call it? It's a crime class. It's literally a social class of people that are working and generationally accumulating power, wealth through committing crimes, basically. And and we're not deterring those guys. They're like,
that's why they came up with RICO laws. The United States was specifically go after organized crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like a ton of like crime bosses, like organized crime bosses in the United States, haven't gone down for maybe them like ordering like the murder of like however many people they ordered the murder on, because they might have been caught on tape, but like, oh, you need to go take care of fucking Ricky, right? And they can just go into court and be like, what does that mean? Like, well, I sent Ricky a fucking basket of flowers, and they can go and be like, oh yeah, he did send Ricky a basket of flowers, you know. But
exactly right.
but in that group of people, they know it's like, oh, if I sent somebody a basket of flowers, that means like they're coming to kill me, right? So I mean, there's all this kind of stuff that's sort of like inside ball that unless you're in that group within that like organized crime unit, you might not necessarily know what it is.
Yep.
And that's why they came up with like RICO laws, you know. So RICO laws is basically they're just going to try and tie like any sort of financial transaction to it's basically like IRS law, you know, like tying in financial transactions where there's no predicated reason why they received this money from this other group, and then they can use that and they can throw people in jail for a long fucking time.
Yeah, let's hang on, guys. I just want to check in. It looks like Censor or Shinigami was trying to get in there.
No, I shipped in from phone to computer.
Oh, do you have anything, Shinigami?
Oh no, I just said it was not me.
Oh, okay.
But I have to go now. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks. I think we'll head down to the tavern now, guys. But thanks to everyone who engaged in the discussion today. It was super interesting. I think one of our best we've ever had on here. So,
I want to say to anybody who's listening on the YouTube channel right now, feel free come to the join on Discord.
Yeah, for sure.
Pangburn, like get in the conversation, man.
Yeah, that's a good point. You guys have the Discord link in the description of this video. Thanks to everyone who engaged today. I see we have the board on, Gary Lang Jr., Clark's back, Mace Starwalk, Salman. You guys were engaging in the text chat on YouTube, so thank you guys so much. And we'll be back live tomorrow with something new. Let art and science inspire.